This episode of 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal is brought to you by
Nobody!
Because advertisements suck! Hello listeners, you're listening to 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal. I am Satyal.
And I'm Silwal, and we're a weekly podcast from the Himalayas.
When it's a Tuesday and it's 7:30, you know it's time for perspectives, conversations, and stories.
This episode, I'm really looking forward to it because about this episode, I don't know much. Right. Before I get into this episode, I just want to talk about the previous episode where one of the comment was how it has helped Bipin Gunung to actually form some perspective on the 9-to-5 job, right? And this is the entire reason why we're doing this podcast, to actually start building our perspectives and show people different light.
Yeah, definitely. That is a very good feeling. So thank you, Bipin, for writing to us, and we hope we'll be able to build better perspectives for you in the days to come. Again, that is not to say that we'll tell you what is right or wrong. We'll let you decide on that, but we'll just be giving you perspectives. Talking of perspectives, Silva, what do we have for today?
Now, this is something that you've been talking about for a few months now, and you've always talked about minimalism, right? And I don't know what minimalism is.
Okay.
And whenever I think of minimalism, I just think of holding less things, right? Being minimal, right? So I just want you to educate me on what blah,
blah, blah. I've never said that in my life. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know where that comes from.
Dennis said his first word.
He did?
Come on, honey. Say it again.
Blah, blah, blah.
I do not say blah, blah, blah.
See, that's what happens, right? Minimalism.
It can get tricky at first. So, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Minimalism 101. I feel like I'm taking a class.
Yep.
Okay, you're spot on when you said it's been a few months that I've been really into this philosophy. So I'll just start with this quote, and I'm sure all of our listeners, including you, have read this quote somewhere on Facebook, and it says, "We buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like with the money that we don't have." Now just think about it. You're buying things that you don't need. Now, how stupid is that? Basically, you're buying things that you don't need, which means you're putting money into that. So when you accumulate stuff, you have to worry about them. You have to worry because they're taking up a lot of space in your room, or you have to maintain them, right? And you're trying to impress people that you don't like through it. So which means that you're probably spending time with people you don't like, which means that it's taking away time from people that you should really be spending your time with, right? And lastly, with money that you don't have. So you're basically taking debt to impress people you don't like and
buying
getting
things that you don't need.
So does it really make sense? No. So minimalism is against this, right? So I cannot really give you an exact definition of minimalism, but what it basically means for me, and we have different perspectives on this, is it's becoming conscious of the things that really matter to you and freeing up your time, energy, money, effort into those things that really matter to you, and just letting go of things that you don't. So you talked about stuff, and yes, that is true. Generally, you do think of stuffs and owning less stuffs, but it's also owning less toxic relationships, or owning less of the time that you'd rather spend somewhere else. So it's a combination of all these things.
So can you give me an example of saving my time for something more important or valuable? Yeah, you talked about not just having things, so just give me an example.
Just give you this example. So you're going to Gorkha for a couple of days, right? So what you realize is the podcast is important to you, and we'll have a hard time recording the podcast if we're not together. So what you've done basically is you have let go of other things that you might have done right now, and you've realized that the podcast is important for you, so you've freed up time to do something that really matters to you. That's a very basic example of being a minimalist. So that's becoming conscious of how you're spending your time, money, energy, whatever it is there, and you're just making the most out of it. That's a very basic example. So if you think of stuffs, then what I recently did was I had these 2 action figures more specifically these two wrestling characters, Stone Cold and The Undertaker, right? So this was gifted to me by someone who loved me a couple of years back, and there's this friend of ours, if you've listened to the 31st Tuesday, the 9 to 5, our guest Amol Boy, they're a very good friend of ours. He loves wrestling and he always wanted those action figures, he had told me, right? So a couple of years back he had told me this, but I was not conscious of it. These two action figures were stored away somewhere in my room. It did not add any value to my life. Taking some space, definitely, right? So now that I'm into minimalism, what I realized was, because this guy was coming to do a podcast with us, I wanted to surprise him, and I gave that to him as a gesture of love. And because it did not add any value to my life, I just gave it to him, and he was so happy. In fact, dedicated an Instagram post and made me famous on Facebook. So that's a very basic example.
Yeah, what you just said, what I learned from it was, you're not just the stuffs are not just taking space in your physical surrounding, but in your mind as well.
Definitely, it's a mental clutter.
Because let's just say if that action figure cost a lot more, you'd always be mindful about locking your door, and that would always take up some of your time, right?
Spot on. You are a smart guy. He's a very quick learner. That's what I love about him. Yeah, basically that is that. So that is the whole idea. It's understanding what's important for you and making room for just that.
All right. I'll ask you another question because you talked about having less clutter, right?
Right.
But I look in front of you a MacBook Air.
Yeah.
And you talked about holding less things, but you're holding this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you contradicting what minimalism talks about?
Yeah, that's a very good point you make. So what I said was, it's identifying what's important to you and making room for that, right? So the MacBook Air obviously costs a lot of money. So it took me a lot of saving to buy this. But when I bought this was a very conscious choice, because I was thinking of the presentations that I make on a regular basis, and Keynote is a large part of all the things that I do. Think about the podcast and how, in retrospect, it made so much sense for us to record it through the MacBook Air.
If this wasn't there,
it would be difficult,
I think,
right? So it has allowed me to do things that I'm really passionate about. The battery backup and everything. I'm like mindful of how much time I take while I'm writing and all those things, right? So it's a conscious choice. Now, if I had bought this MacBook Air because you also have a MacBook Air, and I kind of felt inferior in front of you, now that would not be being minimalistic. But in buying this, I freed up my savings, and I did not spend it on other things that I did not need. So I spent it on things that help me grow and contribute. So that is another aspect of minimalism.
Okay. So what's more? I want to learn more.
All right. So there's this quote that says, "The best things in life aren't things." So as a minimalist, we can really go into experiences. And in one of the other episodes, you've talked about how you are a person who really devours on new experiences, right? So the minimalistic movement is basically, it's about owning less stuff, and experiences are a large part of who we are. And yeah, the best things in life aren't things.
Yeah, I think I just want to add, I was reading, because I was going through and preparing for this episode, even though I don't know much about minimalism. See, there you go again. I came across this blog, and it talked about, I'll just read one paragraph out of it. As much as we like our stuff, they aren't really a part of us, right? This was said by Thomas Gilvovich of Cornell University. He's a psychology professor. And he talked about, arguably, we are the sum total of our experiences. It's almost like building up a resume by virtue of the things that you did. So your experience are like a virtual resume that you're, holding it against other people.
Definitely.
And these are the things that I've done, and this is the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
Which things don't really give us that.
Yeah, definitely. And you must have spent around 4 or 5K on canoeing.
Yeah.
But that experience of going out there with your friends and making a memory for a lifetime, now that's a lot more than any physical stuff that you'd hold.
Yeah.
Right? And another thing that I'd want to add is, minimalism, it's not just about owning less stuff. It's also identifying what's truly important to you and freeing up your time, space, energy, and effort for those things. So for example, I personally am a big advocate of a frugal living. So for me, cars, now those may be status symbols in our part of the world, and probably is everywhere else, right? So because I'm a minimalist, I've identified that owning a car and showing off is not a value that fits into my lifestyle. So when somebody out there comes with this new car and is needlessly blowing the horn and trying to show off that car, my immediate, like, a lot of you might think of that person and be like, shit, this person is really doing well in life and making a lot of money, and look at him, he's happy. But how I see it is, probably because of my minimalistic observations, I look at that person and be like, okay, this guy must be in a lot of debt, because not a lot of people buy cars in cash, because 40, 45, 50 lakhs is a lot of money to be buying your cars in cash. So I look at that person and be like, okay, so this guy has bought a 50 lakhs of car, fine. But how much of freedom is it stealing away from him? That pain of, watching over the car and street kids not scratching it, and the consequent debt. Every night he has to think of ways to pay off the monthly installment.
Yeah, and
that's another thing. And another thing is he goes to a reunion, and so let's say that guy is me, and I meet Silwal there, and he comes with a bigger car than I have. Now,
I definitely got a bigger car, bitches.
So if my value is to show off and use my car as a status symbol, I'm suddenly unhappy because Silwal has a better car, and now I'm below him in status.
Yeah, Gilovich, the same professor, he talked about how he's been studying happiness and relating it with experiences and possessions for some time now, and the three main reasons why doing something brings about more pleasure than owning something is, firstly, experiences become part of our identity. They become who we are, right? They promote social connections with other people. And the thing that you talked about, that jealousy, that envy, it does not trigger the kind of jealousy or envy we often get thinking about someone else's material things. Right?
True, definitely. So that's about material things. But I think overall you need to identify. Now, there are a few things that I would want to urge our listeners. If you really want to get into minimalism, then I think you need to identify a few things that are really important to you.
Okay.
So identify a few values for yourself, identify 4 or 5 things, and see if your daily actions are consistent with the values that you've set. Because what I generally believe is your values drive your daily actions, and how you spend your day is how you spend your life. So if you're not conscious of what's important to you, then somebody else will feed you all these marketing ads, all these advertisements will tell you that your life is incomplete. Remember this capitalistic episode that we did? So they're going to tell you that these things are missing from your life, and you buy those things, and suddenly that's not enough because you want that bigger car, bigger house, and basically the best things in life aren't things.
The thing that you did with me, a while ago was looking around the room and asking me what are the things that are really valuable to me and what are just clutters.
Definitely.
And I'd urge the listener to do the same. Just if you're mindful, just look around the things that you're owning and think of all the boxes and boxes of things that are stored away. Thinking that in a hypothetical future you might use them, but
need it.
You'll never use it. Like,
definitely.
I think this happens with the moms a lot. They try to keep storing and storing. They think of my mom still has the clothes, all right, the baby dress that I wore when I was 6 months old or 2 months old, right? And she
is it because of her attachment to that?
I think it is because to her attachment, and she's like, in the future maybe my grandson will use it, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to use that.
Yeah, that's a very important point you make. I'm sure a lot of listeners will be like, okay, these are the things gifted by my friends. So the action figure that my brother gifted me, I've gifted that to someone who derives greater value out of it. It does not mean I don't love my brother, but I'm just becoming mindful of the things I own because my brother loves me for who I am, not because I am, decorating my room with the stuff that he gives me. So I think we need to come beyond the superfluity of possessions. But another thing that I'd want to add is, again, if you're into minimalism and if constantly trying to reduce the number of things that you own stresses you out, that again is mental clutter in itself. So that's again another thing that you'd want to be mindful of. There are a few minimalists that I follow. So there's a guy called Colin Wright, and he owns a total of 51 things in total.
And he travels the world?
And he travels the world. And 51 things, and you can imagine in those 51 things, his laptop bag and laptop case are counted separately. So you can imagine how 51 things there, right? But
I
not
just
everyone.
Hope he's holding a deodorant.
I'm sure he is. I think I've read that list, but it does not necessarily have to be that way. But it's just becoming mindful of how you spend your time, money, energy, effort, and doing things that truly help you grow. And another thing about cards and everything, right? So if you've moved beyond the materialistic world, then you identify that just because someone rides a Range Rover doesn't mean that person is kind or compassionate or kind-hearted. Someone who does not own anything might also be kind, and so you should probably see people for who they are rather than the type of status and type of things that they own and the kind of status that those things give away.
Okay. So we've talked about minimalism a bit.
I'm glad that you're getting it right now.
Yeah, finally after months and
the
months.
tutor is like teaching you really well.
So how does one start this minimalist journey?
Well, first and foremost, you need to be sure that you want to start an intentional living.
Okay,
A lot of
those
people
things?
just live on autopilot mode, and the first thing that you do is you just look at, okay, do this exercise with me, everyone. All right. So if you have a pen and paper with you, just write down your ideal life. All right. Take your time to write your ideal life, and on another fresh piece of paper, write down how you spent your last 24 hours, and just try to see if the way you spent the last 24 hours really is taking you to the life that you want to live. And now the first thing is becoming conscious. Now once you're conscious of that, then you know how you should be spending your time, money, energy, and effort and everything, right? But if you want to start your minimalism journey, just look around your room, see if there are clothes that you bought last year and you've not worn again. And chances are that you'll not wear it in the next 6 months, because a lot of people hoard just because they feel like they might want to use it. So I'll just give you this example. So I wanted this book from someone I knew, and she was willing to give me that book, but her relative had asked for the book too, right? So I had asked for 2 books, and she took both of those books. I have not gotten that book because she's apparently reading it, and I'm not someone who reads 2 books at once, so I don't know the logic to it, but that's hoarding in so many ways, right? So just a simple example of that, and see if there are clothes that you can give away, see if there's good time that you can give to people you love, and see if you are spending time with people you love rather than trying to impress some clowns on Facebook. That's another.
Yeah, I know we're this generation who love to share and show off on Facebook just because everyone's doing it.
Yeah, definitely. So Silwal, taking yourself for example, like any ways in which now that I've taught you about minimalism, can you just resonate with the things you've done and times when you've become minimalistic yourself?
Every time I spend it on experience rather than on stuffs. I think this has been a wonderful dossier for me because I actually did not buy anything.
Okay.
Because I already had the clothes, I already have my shoes, I have enough. So I think even though it's about stuff, not buying stuff, I've realized that I have enough stuff for me to wear and to move around without having to necessarily go and buy there. Other is every time I spend it on traveling. I just love it, and instead of buying something, I'd rather spend it on there. We talked about canyoning, we talked about a lot of trips, right?
Yeah, definitely. And another thing that I want to add is there might be times when you're buying something that's relatively expensive. So you see a shoe and it costs around 5,000 rupees. Now you're questioning yourself. What I usually do is I question myself twice. Is this aligned with my values? And if I'm sure that I'm going to wear that shoe for 3 years, then it's fine. That's a good return, right? So that's one thing that I can think of. And another very simple perspective that I want to leave you guys with is, think about it. The more you have to spend, the more you have to earn. But if you're conscious of spending less, then probably you can earn less, and then consequently spend it on things that you're passionate about or that really fuels your being and that you like. So that's another perspective that I would love to.
Yeah, I'm just stuck on that wonderful example that you made me do about writing my ideal life and turning it around and looking back at 24 hours of my time. So that is something that has really opened my
so
eyes.
Silwal is already ready with his pen and paper, so I would just leave him with that, and we hope you do that too. Let us know what you think about minimalism, and if you have been minimalistic at times, and
if you want to know more about minimalism, just ask Satyal about it.
Yeah, just let me
I'm
know.
gonna be pestering him into so many questions.
Yeah, alright, so we'll be back again next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on YouTube and on SoundCloud. And one last thing,
it's never too late to start.